Hey, everybody, welcome to Church at Home with Rachel for Monday, the 16th of June. Last week, my husband was listening to something on Facebook or something, and it was this man from the South, the deep South in the States, having a conversation or a monologue maybe or soliloquy about being a real man. And at first, I was like, oh, and then I got listening, thinking he's really got some good points because it seems to me that lately we've been losing ourselves in being told how we are supposed to be. There's people who think we should be woke and people who think we shouldn't be woke. I would refer you back to Jesus, who was indeed pretty woke in that he fed the poor, he fed the hungry, he took care of the poor and he healed the sick. He told us we should be doing the same thing. So, in my thinking, to be a good person, you need to be doing these things. So, there's my take for being a real person. To be a real solid person, you need to be more like Jesus, not less like him. That comes down to all of the things we see in the news these days about who gets to live where and who gets to say what about people's bodies and things like that. But the thing is, thinking about what a real man or a real woman might be can come down to some pretty basic stuff. And I'm not going to argue with you or suggest that this is the way it really works, but I think to be a real man or a real woman or a real person, regardless wherever you feel, however you see yourself, however you identify in your own heart about who you are, to be a real person means living with integrity. Integrity that takes care of other people, not the integrity that says, I believe in this, even though it might hurt other people. So then I'm going to have integrity by living by my belief. I think integrity, real integrity, is recognizing that we have a responsibility for helping take care of each other. Because at the end of the day, we need someone else to take care of us. Tomorrow, I'm going to talk about that risk versus security thing, and the need we have to actually we have for other people, meaning we have to trust people and be kind to them so they'll be there for us to take care of us, to give us some security ourselves. But I kept listening to this guy and thinking he's right. Like good, deep values, like, and I know it sounds sexist and it sounds really ancient and everything, but things like a man's word is his bond, a good old handshake. And I don't think that's only for men. If I shake your hand and say something, I want you to know that I mean what I've said, and I'm going to do my level best to fulfill whatever promise I made by shaking your hand. I may not succeed. It may take me a while, but I'm going to do my level best to honor the promise that I have made to you. And that's not really a man thing or a woman thing, it's a good person thing. And he mentioned something um, about men and women and the way things used to be. And talks about it used to be that you knew what would happen if something bad happened. And we've been seeing this in Manitoba, when something bad happened, that when people have had to be evacuated from their homes, they didn't end up places. Sometimes, and lots of people end up in places where total strangers were. Like people from Flin Flon ended up in Winnipeg. I mean, we're talking like 6 hours away, I think, or more. So they're definitely with strangers in hotels and in gymnasiums and arenas with total strangers. And yet, total strangers are showing up with food and clothing and toys for kids and opportunities for people to go get their hair or their nails done, for people to have a shower, for people to know that their pets are taken care of, and all these things. People showed up, and he referred to when women brought casseroles and men did things that men would do, like fix a flat tire and things like that. All things that men and women can do. Women are can be just as good at fixing a flat tire, and men, my husband is case in point, can be really good at making a casserole. But traditionally, in the past, it was when something happened in society, the men would show up to build the barn or to clean up after an accident, and the women would be at home making the casseroles. I mean, how many of you remember when maybe somebody in the family died, and for the next like 2 days, people would ring the doorbell and give you a casserole dish with a piece of tape on the bottom that had their name on it, so you knew who to give it back to, or a recipe card that said what was in it, and that here you bake it at 350 degrees for 2 hours, or well, 1 hour probably, and then you'd have dinner for a day or two or five. The idea being that when people were living up to their best, because I think we can all admit that generally speaking, society in Canada and the United States right now, in some places, aren't exactly living up to the best. That we like, if somebody were, if an alien were to arrive, if the Martians came and were to take a look at us, would they see people showing up with casseroles and people fixing flat tires? Or would they see people with tire irons and people turning their back on people who needed casseroles? There's a bit of both. There's a bit of both. But this idea that if we were to live out from the best of ourselves, if we were to live the best we are, that we would have casseroles in one hand and consequences in the other. And I really like that because the casseroles say, here you go. I'm going to have to take care of you. I recognize your pain. I recognize your need. And here I am taking that risk of coming to help you. Not because you can do something for me in return, but simply because as a human being, as a kind and generous person, I feel called to help take care of you in your time of need. So here's a casserole. But on the other hand, on those moments when we're not necessarily making those casseroles and taking them to the neighbor in need, we recognize that there are also consequences, and that we aren't necessarily the ones that have to mete out the consequences. But we recognize that what things we do have consequences. That, by taking a casserole, the consequences are maybe a new friend, or the recognition that you've given someone some help, and in the future they might help you back. That's a consequence of doing a kind thing. But also the consequences of when you don't do the right thing. None of us grew up making no mistakes. And the fact that if we have grown up to be good people, if we have grown up to be men and women, siblings in creation who know how to take care of the world, know how to take care of our families, our friends, to do our jobs well, then chances are we learned that from the consequences of our actions before. When we made mistakes, there were consequences that helped us realize, oh, that was not the right thing to do. Now, it might be because we recognize that we did it wrong, like you choose a hammer on a screw and you ruin what you're working on. That's a consequence, not to do it again. Or it could be that you hurt somebody, intentionally or not, and you realize the consequences, you get in trouble or you lose a friend. But we learn by consequences to walk with a casserole in one hand and consequences in the other. That's what can make a real man or a real woman, a real person, really become who they're called to be. That we acknowledge that we need to be good people, but we also acknowledge that we have to deal with consequences. And the older we get, and the more we learn, the more we begin to recognize that the consequences, sometimes consequences are bad, and hopefully we learn from them not to do what we just did. But other kinds of consequences are friendship, love, jobs we can do, opportunities to try new things. Consequences can be positive as well. And when we're living a really good life, we will take care of other people, the casseroles, and we will benefit from the consequences of choosing to do the right thing. Casseroles and consequences. I may not have done this gentleman in his speech justice, but he certainly changed the way I think about things. So I don't know who he was. All I know is he was a Southern gentleman, and I appreciated his honest to God way of speaking and his reminder that we need to walk with casseroles in one hand and consequences in the other. Have a great day. I will see you again tomorrow for Church at Home with Rachel. God bless everybody.